The LDS Church of Satan, described by the Daughters of David Lee Hamblin, has a who's who of prominent Latter-day Saint artists as members. There's painter Brian Kershesnick, who learned his craft under painter Lee Binion, after a failed apprenticeship under her husband, Joe the Potter, or Joseph Wood Binion of Horseshoe Mountain Pottery. There's Tom Schulte, whose sculptures and paintings hang in various places, perhaps none more prominent than the Utah State Capitol building. His sculpture entitled The Orgasm was allegedly part of a trade for sexual favors between Schulte and Roselle Stevenson, the mother of Rachel, Eliza, Katherine, and Miriam Hamblin. Roselle Stevenson allegedly operated a thriving child prostitution business whereby clients within the Church of Satan would trade artwork for sexual services from Stevenson's daughters. And then there's Randall Lake, a prominent LDS artist who converted to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in France. Lake's origin story is that of a young homosexual man, struggling to find his voice artistically and personally, who came across the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints after a short stint in a Baptist commune in Switzerland. Lake made a profession of faith in Christ at the commune, but after a month, he moved back to Paris, where he was invited by a friend to a sacrament service of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. As Lake tells it, he was emotionally struck by the testimony given by a young woman, and he came to believe that the church would be his protection against his homosexual attraction. He would not act on his urges, and when he read Spencer W. Kimball's book The Miracle of Forgiveness, he zeroed in on the notion that if he could change his environment with marriage, he could overcome his same-sex attraction. Lake then struck up a relationship with a girl he had known in his teenage years, and they were married in Paris in 1971. For 16 years, Lake would balance his closeted homosexuality against his public image as a Latter-day Saint. In 1981, Randall Lake's father died, paving the way for him to acknowledge the possibility of living openly as a gay man. Lake mulled over how to be a gay man while keeping his marriage intact for another 3 years, and by 1984, he was traveling to San Francisco to work in a gallery, but his timing was inconvenient. The city was in the throes of the AIDS epidemic, and gay men were terrified to engage in casual sex. Lake returned to Salt Lake City, where he began to attend a meeting comprised of ex-Mormons and Mormon gays, and it was there that he recognized the organist in his stake. The two men would embark on an affair that lasted over a year, but which ended abruptly when Lake's lover hung himself in his basement. The funeral marked a change in Lake's life, because he determined that his normal life had to be sacrificed in order to live life as an openly gay man. Lake was excommunicated shortly after his lover's funeral, and discarded his attempts at a normal life as a husband and father in favor of a life lived openly as a gay man. His artwork is defined by the bitter breakups he endured with his male lovers, from the funeral in 1987 to the 2004 breakup with his longtime boyfriend. As of 2010, Lake claimed to have had 6 lovers, 2 of whom were Latter-day Saints who committed suicide. One of his lovers died from AIDS. The Hamblin sisters contradict Lake's claims. The Hamblin sisters describe Lake's participation in LDS Church of Satan ceremonies throughout the 90s, including numerous rapes and sexual assaults, as well as the trafficking of young polygamist boys to Lake's home in Spring City. This is the story of Randall Lake, a former Latter-day Saint and alleged member of the LDS Church of Satan. Welcome to Profiles, a series by Investigations in Ritual Abuse. Hi, it's Rachel again. I'm going to tell you the story of Randall Lake's involvement in the LDS Church of Satan. Everything I'm going to tell you is from the victim's statement I filled out with the Provo Police Department. Randall Lake, a Utah artist, was also a CS member. My redacted would talk about the stone house he worked and lived in. It was locally called the Spring City Endowment House and had been Orson Hyde's office. Redacted said Orson Hyde had built it to perform LDS temple ordinances, on the 2nd floor, before the Monty Temple was dedicated. Redacted loved to talk about how the LDS temple symbols had been carved on the front of the building. One night we drove to Randall's home for a ceremony. He greeted us at the door wearing his black cloak and smiling. Redacted told him they brought a little gift for his hospitality, me. He hardly glanced at me but thanked Redacted for the gift with a smile. I had not known this plan of Redacted. It was dim downstairs with only a few candles lit. We went upstairs. There were more people waiting and more continued to come. There were many places to lounge in the small room upstairs. There was an altar at the opposite end of room away from the stairs. When all had arrived, we were instructed to hold hands while Joe prayed kneeling and looking up with his arms in a V. Then he put a rabbit on the altar, in a large, ceremonial, shallow bowl of his own pottery, and disemboweled it while it was alive. It made a cry, at which point people started exclaiming praise to Lucifer, and kicked its legs. Joe reached and pulled the guts out with his left hand and held them up to the square and said another prayer. The elders were all chanting. Lee gave him towel for his hands. Then everyone knelt and put their arms up in a V, the best they could, the ceiling is low, and prayed for Lucifer's spirits to enter them. Then the orgy started. I really needed to go to the bathroom and knew I would have to go alone. I snuck downstairs. It was very dim. I tiptoed across the floor to the bathroom. All of a sudden, I was pushed inside and slammed against the wall as the door was shut and locked. It was Randall and he was furious at me for disappearing on him. He grabbed a handful of my hair at the front top of my head and tilted my head back. He laughed and hissed obscenities at me. He started consecrating me to Lucifer and then pushed me down onto the toilet. He unzipped his pants and held my head back and put his penis in my mouth. He told me to suck it. And called me a little cunt and other obscenities. He kept hold of my hair and forced his penis deep into my throat. When he was done, he ejaculated all over my face and neck. He stood there panting and bracing himself on the walls and called me a fucking whore. Then he left. Frequency: Randall would host ceremonies in his home, especially for other artists from Spring City, Salt Lake, etc. He usually had several young polygamist boys brought in to abuse for the night, of all ages, but often within ages 7 to 14. His house was smaller, so it was sometimes hard to all fit, but CS members and others loved the fact it was once an LDS endowment house. CS members often expressed their love and excitement in desecrating any site considered holy to LDS or other Christian people. The resurrection ceremony or triumph ceremony is a very sacred ceremony in the Church, CS. We were taught that Church, CS, members would have the priesthood power from Lucifer to resurrect each other when Jesus Christ returned to the earth. We were taught that you must become deaf to hearing Jehovah's voice so that you hear Lucifer when he spiritually calls your special name. Once resurrected, we would all have to battle Jehovah and his army, but would triumph in the end. The triumph ceremony represents the ultimate goal of the elect of Lucifer. To triumph also means to have been successful in your faith in and service to Lucifer and be worthy to enter Lucifer's kingdom, outer darkness as the LDS Church calls it, see calling and election. Equally important, the triumph is that human beings can not only go against God's premortal plan, but go completely around it and have no need for Jesus Christ and the atonement. The elders would often speak to us about our personal triumph. Redacted often told me how my entire bloodline was depending on Redacted and I to carry it forward into the future and be worthy for the triumph. My mother came and woke us up a few hours after we had gone to bed. She laid my cloak on my bed, which she kept in her closet, and told me to hurry. I took off my pajamas and put on my cloak in the dark. We were often made to do this ceremony naked and we weren't allowed to turn on our bedroom lights. I went into my sister's room and whispered to them to hurry so we wouldn't get in trouble. They took a long time, which made me very anxious. We got outside and joined everyone in the shadows by the inside fence under the trees. This night we were with Redacted, Joe, and Lee Binion, some friends of the Binions who did the Grand Canyon stuff with them, and Paul Larson, Randall Lake, and an artist friend of his, Dave and Deborah Sheets, Tom, and Paula Schulte, James Harmston, and I think one of his senior wives was there. There were also a few people I kind of recognized, but did not know. They had 4 graves dug this night because of the big group. We were told to line up by my mom. She held the LDS temple name cards she collected. When it was my turn, I walked up and gave my cloak to Joe, who was the witness standing by. I lay down on the blanket they had laid in the dirt and they folded it over me. They threw a shovel full of dirt over me, to signify burial. My father officiated and said the ceremonial words. When I watched others do this, he knelt on the ground and raised his left arm to the square. When he was done, he took my hand and I lifted the blanket off me and he raised me up to standing position. Joe handed me my cloak and I put it around my shoulders, and then Joe placed a black ball and scepter into my hands. I repeated some covenants, after my father, and then handed the objects back and got back in line to do it again with a different name. When we were done, everyone came inside and my mom served a huge pot of hot vegetable soup, the broth made from human bones she kept in our freezer, and some bread from the bread maker. Others brought more homemade bread and chips and salsa. Everything was done by candlelight. After the elders ate, they did a prayer circle and had an orgy. I was vaginally raped by Dave Sheets and anally raped by Randall Lake and his friend. I had to give oral sex to Deborah Sheets and Paula Schulte. Randall Lake will be 74 years old this year. He will die before law enforcement makes an arrest or secures a conviction against him for his alleged crimes. In 2012, when the Hamblin sisters reported their father and his associates in the LDS Church of Satan, law enforcement had all of the victims' statements referenced in this film. They arrested David Lee Hamblin, but dropped the charges against him even though they had a taped recording of Hamblin apologizing to his daughter for raping her. The Utah County Attorney's Office did not file charges against any of Hamblin's alleged accomplices in the LDS Church of Satan. There is nothing in the record that indicates the Provo Police Department or the Utah County Attorney's Office questioned anyone besides David Lee Hamblin about the allegations made by Rachel, Eliza, and Katherine Hamblin. Time is running out to interview Randall Lake, and to obtain information about the full extent of his participation in the alleged crimes of the LDS Church of Satan and its membership. The nomination of Juab County Attorney Ryan Peters to a juvenile court judgeship by Governor Spencer Cox has stripped the current Hamblin criminal cases of an active prosecutor. There's one way to fight this, and that is for public outrage and political pressure on Utah's political, legal, and business establishment to compel a reckoning for those who allegedly raped, trafficked, and murdered children as part of the LDS Church of Satan and other ritual abuse groups. Call your elected representatives, and tell them you want Representative Ken Ivory's legislation passed to have a referendum to amend the Utah Constitution to extend the statute of limitations in civil sexual abuse cases to 35 years after the victim turns 18. Tell them you want Ken Ivory's House Bill 196 passed into law, because it creates the crime of ritual abuse of a minor, while amending and strengthening the definitions of rape of a child, object rape of a child, and sodomy on a child. Evil requires nothing more than indifference to triumph. Ritual abuse is real, and there are thousands of victims who are waiting for justice. Stand with them. Stand against evil.